Welcome to Today at Wayne, a podcast that engages and informs the Wayne State University campus community. With news, announcements, information, and current events discussions relevant to the university's goals and mission, Today at Wayne serves as the perfect forum for our campus to begin a conversation or keep one going. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Today at Wayne podcast. I'm Daryl Dawsey. With the wave of marijuana legalization having swept states throughout the country in recent years, Americans are talking differently and more openly about marijuana use than ever before. But while much of the conversation is focused on cultural and criminal justice implications, at WSU, the conversation has centered largely on research. In August, the state of Michigan awarded Wayne State University a $7 million grant to investigate in military veterans the potential therapeutic effects of cannabis to improve patients' quality of life and reduce post-traumatic stress disorder and depressive symptoms that can precede suicide. Leading the project is the School of Medicine's Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences, Leslie Lundahl, PhD. Dr. Lundahl is a research educator in the Translational Neuroscience Graduate Program and Drug Lab Detroit, a multidisciplinary team at the School of Medicine focused on understanding more about the development and treatment of substance abuse and substance use disorders. She's here with us on the Today at Wayne podcast to talk about some of the cutting edge work she's doing in cannabis research. Welcome, Dr. Lundahl.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk about some of this work. It's pretty exciting.
So good to, it seems like it. You know, a lot of folks, you know, they see, marijuana or cannabis and maybe there are a few Snickers and, because, we're still sort of developing an approach to this thing that goes beyond, it being prohibited in America for so long. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about some of the research that your lab has been doing. You guys have been doing some stuff on the negative effects of drug abuse, but now you're taking a look at some of the therapeutic effects and what potential it has. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Sure. So for about the last 25 years, we've been conducting what are called behavioral pharmacology studies in the laboratory with humans, meaning that we administer different drugs, perhaps alone or in combination with other drugs, to see how they affect people in terms of subjective effects or cardiovascular effects, physiologic effects, cognitive effects. And so we've done a lot of studies on, we've looked at MDMA or ecstasy, we've looked at methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, other opiates, certainly tobacco, alcohol, and of course, cannabis. So really what we have focused on has been medications development, looking at ways that we can help people who want to stop or cut down their drug use. So we've been very focused on sort of the negative effects and how we can sort of help people return to a healthier level of functioning. So this is a radical departure for us because now we're looking at one of these substances, cannabis, which not too long ago was sort of viewed as the evil weed or the gateway to harder drugs or, whatever view you might have. We're now looking at this particular substance as a possible therapeutic for folks, and that's kind of a radical departure.
It is. Let me ask you, why are you're focusing on military veterans right now? Why are they sort of your target? Why are they so important to this study?
Sure, that's a good question. So one of the reasons that this grant was funded, the funding came about through the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, which is the state of Michigan's regulatory agency for cannabis. And their interest in veterans is that, so first of all, anywhere from 13 to 31% of US combat or military veterans experience PTSD, and that's a far greater rate than you'd see in the general population, which is usually around 5 to 10%. A lot of veterans who seek treatment for PTSD and trauma-related problems report that they use cannabis on their own to self-treat their PTSD and depression-related disturbances for things like stress. With PTSD, you often see sort of an exaggerated startle or sort of a hyper arousal, sort of panic symptoms. They can have negative mood, pain. Oftentimes they don't sleep well. They have nightmares. We also know that more than 6,400 US veterans died by suicide in 2018, and this is a rate that's actually increasing. This is more than 17 suicides every single day. The suicide rate is probably due to untreated or undertreated depression and PTSD symptoms and their related psychological problems. And another point that's important is that in a recent survey, more than 20% of veterans reported that they used cannabis to manage their mood and anxiety symptoms. 75% of them said they would consider cannabis as a treatment option for pain or mental health issues. And 68% believe that the US Department of Veteran Affairs should allow research exploring the use of cannabis as a therapeutic option. Currently, they do not. We sort of believe that we owe it to our service people to look outside the box for any kind of treatment that could give any kind of relief, because this is just too high of a cost. There's too many lives lost.
Now, I know you're not an advocate one way or another necessarily, but we know that, even as states are legalizing marijuana, it continues to be treated like a Schedule A drug by the federal government.
Mhm.
Does that in any way hamper the work that you're trying to do?
It doesn't hamper ours so much because we are one of the lucky few laboratories in the country that are allowed to administer cannabis in a smoked route of administration.
Okay.
So, there are FDA regulations, DEA regulations, and NIH regulations, and all three of those agencies sort of have to align in a magical way to get approval and get all the certifications to be able to do this kind of work. So we are fairly lucky. We've been able to do this for about 20 years, like I said, but it did take us a couple years to get all of those stars aligned to get the required regulatory things in place.
Now, is one aim, there's talk about, the
Mhm.
CBD, which, has, medicinal effects, THC, which I guess is the main psychoactive
Mhm.
ingredient in marijuana.
Exactly.
Are you guys, does your research involve sort of trying to find a balance between the two of these? How do how are they dealt with? How are they addressed in the research?
Well, so that's actually one of the major goals of our study is, as you probably know, like you just said, THC is the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis, and CBD is a cannabinoid also found in the plant cannabis that does not have psychoactive effects. And in fact, it looks like CBD might be the ingredient that does have more of the pain relieving or the anti-inflammatory or the calming effects to when you smoke marijuana. So one of our goals is to look at different ratios. So for example, a lot of folks who say that they use marijuana or cannabis for symptom relief don't like being high.
Okay.
Right, they don't enjoy that feeling of intoxication. So one thing that could be recommended to them is that they find a product with a lower THC concentration with a higher CBD concentration, right? But we know very little about that. We don't know what kind of concentrations work better for pain, which ones work better for sleep, which ones work better, to sort of calm your stress. So one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at the safety and the effectiveness of different combinations. So for example, we'll look at high THC, high CBD, high THC, low CBD, high CBD, low THC, and high THC, or low CBD, high THC. So those 4 variations of those two. And really what we're looking for is what's safest. We know that THC raises heart rate. We know that it has cardiovascular effects, and especially if we're looking at older people, this is a concern. So we really want to try to figure out what is the optimal combination of symptom relief that is most safe.
Are you also addressing issues such as delivery? You mentioned
Yep.
cardiovascular issues. So, is there smoking of the marijuana? Are people consuming edibles? How is this being delivered?
For this clinical trial, we're going to use a vaporizer, a medical grade vaporizer. And the reason for this is with edibles, a lot of people find them very unpleasant because there's a very slow onset of action, as with any oral drug. And then once it's on board, it stays on board for hours, right? Whereas, a smoked or a vaporized drug comes on very quickly and doesn't stay for very long. So that allows us to do our testing in a laboratory without making people have to stay there for hours and hours and hours. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, but
Um,
at some point, we will have to look at a sort of, an oral thing, an oral delivery, because I seriously doubt that a smoked drug is going to be accepted as an actual medication because there's too many risks with smoking.
sure,
So,
I
mhm,
would imagine.
yeah.
Um, uh, you've studied the issue of drug abuse for years.
Mhm.
We talked at the outset about changing public perceptions
Mhm.
around marijuana. Are you surprised at these changes that are taking place? And to what degree do these changes make it easier for researchers like you to do your work?
I think that's a really interesting question. I'm not sure. I guess I would say yes and no. In some ways, to me, I feel like it's been very quick that marijuana has, so remember that movie in the 1920s, what was this called?
Reefer madness.
Reefer Madness, right? And so there's this perception of that, that you smoke and you go insane. Then all through the 60s and 70s when it started to get popular, and there were things like Just Say No and Dare, and if you smoke, you're not gonna be able to think. Um, so to me, it seems like it's been sort of quick to go from that to now it's a medication that's therapeutic, right? But if you think about it in context, cannabis has been used for thousands of years, right? It has been in use for it can be tracked way back to Egyptian times. So in that context, it really has not been a quick evolution. If you think about it, I would say I'm a little concerned that it's being embraced so quickly in popular opinion, because I think that's outpaced the science. So that makes me a little bit nervous. We really don't have well-controlled evidence that support these uses yet. And so this is one of the studies that I think is going to help clear that up. And certainly we need many, many more studies that will help clear it up, but they have to be well-controlled, well-designed studies.
Do you worry that there's a danger that as we sort of culturally come to embrace, and normalize marijuana use, are you concerned that perhaps in doing that, we may be diminishing some of the actual negative physical effects?
I think we could, and I guess where my concern would lie there is with adolescents, because I think we have very clear data that the brain is still developing in very important ways up until when people are 24, 25 years old. And the research is fairly clear that if you start smoking early at 13, 14, 15 years, that there are some changes in brain chemistry and brain structure that may not be reversible and over time may show up, particularly in middle age, as things like memory decline or difficulty with cognitive functioning. So I am concerned about teenagers thinking that, hey, this is medicine, it's very safe, when really I'd like them to delay. So I think that's one of the things I worry about.
Got you. Last thing for me,
Sure.
just tell us a little bit about your team. You guys
Oh
are
yeah.
pretty robust team doing some heavy lifting. Just tell me a little bit.
Yeah, we've got a pretty big team, and a lot of that is because there are a lot of moving parts to this project. We try to get as much data as we can to inform as many different areas as we can. So we have to bring in experts in all of these different areas. So I am actually a clinical psychologist and a behavioral pharmacologist, and my colleague Dr. David Ledgerwood is a clinical psychologist, and he and I will be conducting the 2 clinical trials that are looking at whether THC and CBD reduce PTSD symptom severity and suicidal ideation. Dr. Seth Norholm is a co-principal investigator with me, and he and Dr. Tanya Jovanovic are both experts in neurobehavioral aspects of trauma and PTSD. So they're going to look at individual differences in fear learning and extinction, as well as psychophysiological reactivity to trauma cues. Dr. Norholm is actually an expert in creating VR environments. And so he is going to be creating a virtual reality environment to expose some of our participants to trauma related cues and the safety of just the trauma, the VR environment, rather than actually, obviously, the real trauma environment. Dr. Hilary Maruzak's an expert in the endocannabinoid system. So this is the body's own cannabinoids that are in the brain. She'll be looking at how the effects of THC and CBD interact with the body's own cannabinoids, endocannabinoids. And so that's pretty interesting. And then Dr. Mark Greenwald is a behavioral pharmacologist. He'll be looking at genetic markers that will help us hopefully be able to predict who might have a positive response to THC or CBD, or more, just as importantly, have a negative response. We also have a chemist and some biostatisticians to help with all the analyses. So we have a pretty broad team. It's a very strong team, and we need every single one of them to pull this off.
Yeah, it sounds like this is going to be some heavy lifting.
This is going to be, this is a big project.
Very qualified people.
Absolutely.
Well, it's good to know that we're doing this kind of research, and we're trying to do what we can to help vulnerable populations, particularly our veterans. Is there anything else that maybe you want to add about this work? Something maybe I haven't asked you, or something that you'd like to emphasize?
I guess part of what I'd like to say is that, this is a pretty unprecedented project. And I think, this is not necessarily something the federal government would fund. And so we're very thankful the state of Michigan for sort of having the vision to see that this is something that's important, whether we find that cannabinoids are therapeutic or have too many risks. I mean, that's really important for us to know. Physicians need to know how to discuss whether or not a patient should try a cannabis therapeutic. And I think they need data to really guide those discussions, and people need to be informed, do I really want to try this CBD for my pain? What does the science say? What kind of dose do I need? Do I mix it with THC or not? And I think that's stuff that we just don't have a lot of scientific guidance on yet. So I think this project is really going to move us forward. And I think that's exciting, whether it's our group or other groups who are able to sort of take it further after we get these results. I think that's pretty exciting.
All right. Well, we wish you all the very best, and it's very important research. Dr. Leslie Lundahl, thanks so much for joining us here at the Today at Wayne podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope to have you on again soon. Take care.
Absolutely. Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Today at Wayne. We'd love to hear from you, our campus community, about other podcast ideas and topics. What compelling things are you doing to spread the good word about living, learning, working, and playing like a warrior? Let us know by visiting todayatwayne.edu.